So this is the turn of Moscow to join the long list of people who have found Boris Johnson to be a liar. I mean, did the world need Boris Johnson to be told, to be identified, to be called a liar by Russia? I mean, hasn't there been enough evidence that Johnson is a liar? Only on Saturday, not this last Saturday, but or was it in the last years? It was only on Saturday that the Times newspaper in London ran the column by Matthew Paris, one of their regular quote columnists, conservative. And as he confessed in that particular column, the word he's a Sunakite, that is, he's supporting, propping up Rishi Sunak's regime. And in that same column, Matthew Paris called Boris Johnson a steaming heap of dogmas on Britain's pavement. I mean, that is not something that can be found to have been said about any previous incumbent or holder of the post of British Prime Minister. And within hours, Johnson manages to reveal that he was threatened by Vladimir Putin, who, according to the statement citing Johnson, Putin's words were very English. The style is very British. I mean, this is not how the Russians would use language. And so, therefore, the fact that Johnson has been condemned as a dogmas by a long-standing conservative commentator and former member of parliament was serious accusation about Johnson's lack of integrity, lack of character, lack of decency, lack of anything dignified. So any dignified individual would have thought about that and reviewed their character, their behavior, their various activities. Instead, Johnson does the opposite. And he, quote, remembers that before the Ukraine attack by Russia, Vladimir Putin made a phone call to him, Johnson, and spoke like a British person and threatened to kill him in 1 minute. This is not the kind of thing that even Putin has been accused of doing about other occupants in the posts of governments that are inimical to or hostile to the Russians. Not even the US administration currently fronted by Joe Biden. So instead of taking stock of the really lengthening list of accusations against him already in Britain, Johnson goes international and he draws attention to himself by saying that he was threatened by Vladimir Putin. Now, if it is true that Putin made the phone call to number 10 Downing Street and made the threat that Johnson claims, doesn't it show that as far as Vladimir Putin was concerned, he was treating Boris Johnson as more kind of hostile to Russia and more relevant in the context of Ukraine than the Ukraine president? Why would Putin make a phone call to Boris Johnson and threaten to kill him instead of saying the same thing to the Ukraine president? And if the logistics of what Johnson says Putin said to him, if the logistics is examined, how is it that Putin has not managed to kill the Ukraine president yet? Nearly a year after actual launch of the actual war against Ukraine. In the Persian kind of tradition, there is a saying, "Waqt zarurat." Times of emergency. Well, it's not an original Persian saying, but it's a Persian version. It is actually a sword of the Damocles. Somebody who has been sentenced to death, I mean, they have nothing to fear. So they can say anything. So it's desperation, in other words. Johnson, I mean, with all the increasing list of allegations against his misconduct, abuse of public office, abuse of public facilities, and his sleaze and corruption. I mean, how can Johnson be promoted by anyone in Britain, which is what is happening? Because after Sunak was forced to sack Zahawi as the Conservative chairman, which is a joke position anyway, there was immediate, instant kind of speculation that immediately after that decision by Sunak, who had no option but to sack Zahawi, that Boris Johnson was being, and the phrase is touted as the next chairman of the Conservative Party. Now, who in their sane mind would want Johnson anywhere within a country mile, as John Barker used the phrase, country mile? Want Johnson anywhere within a country mile of either the Conservative Party HQ or of the Conservative Party fronted government in the UK? So Johnson is not only losing, well, he has really no credibility at all, but it seems that he is losing the last bits of the marble, the mental equilibrium. So that is the comment that we can make at this stage. We could go on, but we are not going to go into long list because Johnson was correctly, accurately described by Sylvie Barman, the French ambassador to the UK until 2017. In her memoir that she wrote about being in the UK as France's ambassador, Sylvie Barman correctly condemned Johnson as a congenital liar without any doubt. And it is absolutely true based on the evidence of his behavior. Even Jennifer Arcanobi's many adulterous kind of mistresses, because Johnson was still married to Marina Wheeler, the licensed law trader, now a Queen's Counsel. And Johnson was having sex in the same bed that he slept in with Marina Wheeler. And he had sex, according to the recollections by Jennifer Arcuri, he had sex with Jennifer Arcuri literally minutes before Marina Wheeler came back home. I mean, that is how absolutely disgracefully, I mean, lacking in anything, self-respect or whatever, Johnson is. And even his daughter by Marina Wheeler, one of the daughters, condemned him as a bastard. That was done because when she spoke, his daughter, her mother, Johnson's wife, still married wife, Marina Wheeler, was having treatment for cancer. And it was during that period that Johnson, instead of showing any solidarity, support, compassion, and care for Marina Wheeler and the children, Johnson was engaged in rampant adulterous sex with any number of people, including, of course, most likely Jennifer Arcuri. Taking a look at the year before Johnson was allowed to get in as mayor in 2008 at the expense of the people of London, the then incumbent, Ken Lying Still Livingstone, was coming apart. That is to say, Livingstone was losing whatever moral scruples and self-respect he had. I mean, many of the things that came out, nothing to do with politics as such, but to do with the person being in the politics. I mean, Livingstone was pictured, videoed, carrying a glass of alcohol as he was kind of walking towards the London Assembly, or walking nearby, or walking within, let's say, visual sight because of the technology. And Lying Still Livingstone was going through the list of accusations against him of corruption, that he had abused the Greater London Assembly, London Assembly funds, including giving money to Lee Jasper, his ethnicity diversity display, and Livingston went to the point of saying that he, Livingston, would trust Lee Jasper with his life. That is to say, he had the highest amount or standard or level of trust in Lee Jasper protecting him. Now, just take a second and contrast that with the 5 black-skinned police men in Memphis, Tennessee, beating an innocent black man, Tyra Nichols, to death, while Nichols was crying for his mom, and he was telling them that he wanted to go home, that all he wanted to do was to go home. The trust that so many mental slaves show in white post holders, white people in power, is totally absent from their attitude towards other black people, either other black people of African origin, if they are African origin themselves, or other black people of Asian origins and backgrounds. And the word black I use as a genus in the framework of the ethnicity-based kind of world. The broad definition, the broad division is between Western European whites and the rest of the population of the world who are not Western European white. There are various variations in the pigmentation, skin color, and the other aspects of the physical appearances of people of African origin on the one hand and people of Asian origin on the other. But because Asia is the biggest continent with the largest number of people on the planet, Asia contains, ethnicity-wise, more than one significant classifications and categories. But that is a subset. The main set is the Asian people, Western European white people. So if the persons in comparable situation in the UK, so the police wearing the Metropolitan Police uniforms, but being of African background, if they come across a person of African origin or Asian origin in the streets of London, how would they see those persons as compared to when they see the white person? These black skinned African origin, let's say, black people in metropolitan police uniforms would be hostile to the people, both African origin ones and Asian origin ones. That is an extreme form of perversion of the character and the kind of humanity of the individuals, and that is because of the brainwashing by the racist culture, all overwhelming, all devouring, all covering, all encompassing one sided racist influence and brainwashing. I mean, nobody has yet been able to identify what were the actual sources for the motivation of the five black skinned murderers that murdered Tyre Nichols. But it is an informed guess that they were all brainwashed in the same way. I mean, there is a new columnist appearing on the Times newspaper. It's like he's an African origin person, and he's behaving in exactly the identical way that Trevor Terrible Phillips, who has been the official mental slave in Britain for decades. Now, this new Trevor Terrible Phillips type 1, was commenting on the Scottish actor who has returned his OBE in disgust at the role of the late Brenda Queen and her royal family, the monarchy, played in exacerbating the racist empire and colony. And this mental slave is saying that the actor was being fake or faking it, that he was not genuinely against imperialism and colonialism. Now, why would he say that? Why can't he accept that this individual returned the so called honor and gave as his reason for returning the role of empire and imperialism and racism and toxicity and poisonous role of the empire and the imperialists? Why can't he be entitled to say that he disagrees with empire and he has reflected on the role of the empire in brainwashing and in discriminating against people, and so therefore he is staging a genuine protest by returning that gong. The fact that this new Trevor Terrible Phillips has not done that, has not given the man the credit for his moral and ethical stance, shows that brainwashing of black skinned individuals in the UK is going on at a pace that is faster. It's not slower, but faster than before, which shows that those who actually claim to be the official opponents of racism, especially the ones that are to be found in the various so called left outlets, what is left of the left outlets, are not really opposing racism. As for the role of the Greater London Council, GLC, which was fronted by Ken Livingstone, the GLC had a thing called the Police Committee, the Police Committee Support Unit, PCSU. Now, the Police Committee Support Unit had a number of employees that the Police Committee Support Unit had a number of employees that went on to do other things after the disbandment of the GLC. But it is very interesting. It is very interesting to notice that the Police Committee Support Unit employees, typified by one Paul Gilroy, does not mention the Police Committee Support Unit and the years that he spent there peddling the lies of the GLC. Now, Paul Gilroy has been wrongly described by The Guardian and others as probably the most intellectually accomplished person in Britain. How the fuck? How the fuck? Now, Paul Gilroy would not have hidden his role, his work in the GLC, if he was intellectually honest. Clearly not. And he is actually one that has been attacking black people from the platforms given to him by racists, people who have been campaigning against racism. Gilroy has created his own identity by attacking the people of African origin, Asian origin, and Muslims for their own identities and identity-based platforms and stands. Paul Gilroy is not, according to his assessment of himself, he doesn't come from Africa. His mother, who is African origin, but his father is white. And it is clear that Paul Gilroy has dismissed whatever black African origins he had in him, his blood. He dismissed any intellectual content that might be traceable in his background. So unlike Trevor Terrible Phillips, Paul Gilroy has been operating in a kind of surreptitious, subterranean platform. He has been moving very fast from one academic institution to another. And he has been given platforms in the continent by many of the university and academic institutions there. And essentially, the reason why they are doing that is not because Paul Gilroy is opposing racism, but Paul Gilroy is reinforcing racism by adding his dimension. And he is making a claim. Because his father is white, he thinks that he is more intellectually entitled to tell the whole African origin people, Asian origin people, and Muslims what is right and what is wrong. But he is hiding his role in the GLC. We shall be talking more about Paul Gilroy, and we shall wonder why his so-called PhD work is not being accessible, unlike most of the PhD work that others have done. It seems to me, so far, we can find other evidence, other reasons, that Paul Gilroy doesn't have the intellectual honesty to come forward, come out, and confront the opposition to racism that is happening. Whatever the reason, the people who in the UK who joined the movement for Black Lives Matter could not have been criticized for being less serious than the likes of Paul Gilroy. They genuinely believe that Black Lives Matter, which is true. The problem is that those who said Black Lives Matter are not themselves fully committed to defending the Black lives at every level in the United Kingdom. That is the thing, which is what I have discussed before, and I shall be updating on later another time, not necessarily in this particular edition. There are these African origin conservatives who are getting platforms, the increasing platforms than African origin or Asian origin members of the Labour Party currently in public platforms. And looking at the actual contributions, the contents of what they are saying, it is very clear that they are being promoted not because of their humanity as African origin individuals, human beings, but because of their usefulness as diversity displays that are carrying the agenda of the racists, of the anti-black people. Which is why all the ones mainly African origin, but not confined to African origin totally, because of the likes of Priti Patel and now Suella Braverman, who are both Indian origin, whatever the religious backgrounds. But regardless of their African origin or Asian origin, identities or backgrounds, these conservatives and the Tories have got one thing in common among themselves. They are totally engaged in public, at least, totally engaged in public in opposing the people who oppose racism and imperialism. And it seems that it is that purpose they are serving, in return for which they have been given the positions. And that includes Rishi Sunak, of course. There is one little kind of temporary point that I'll make about Rishi Sunak. Many people on the social media have said that Sunak should have sacked Suella Braverman long time ago, in the context of the kind of changes in the leadership of the Conservative Party. But it is a mystery, they say, that Sunak hasn't sacked Braverman, despite evidence that she has broken more rules, ministerial codes, than Zahawi, and that she is still mysteriously being allowed to remain in post. In addition to that, Braverman is worse as Home Secretary than Priti Patel ever was, which is a very difficult thing to say, but that is true based on the facts. And it is clear from the headline on the Times. I'm looking at it now, the Times of Friday, 27th of January. The main lead story on the Times headline front page reads, PM's foreign student plan to shore up economy. Now that's the clue as to why he has not sacked Suella Braverman. Because Braverman is on the record as having repeatedly named India as being the country of origin of the majority of fraudulent students coming to the UK. Because according to Suella Braverman, the largest number of student fraudsters in the UK, to the UK, are from India. They don't not only come themselves, but they come with the family, dependents, which is a completely different thing than being student. Being student is a cover for an immigration or migration scam done openly by the Indians. So if Sunak were to sack Suella Braverman, he would not be able to get any cooperation from the Home Office, because she would then make it difficult from wherever she would find herself in the post-sacking kind of situation. So Sunak is trying to stay in peaceful relationship with Suella Braverman so that he can actually do the main agenda he has been intent on doing, which is to bring as many Indian students to the UK as possible. And that means that Sunak has been an extension of the agenda that has been pursued by Narendra Modi and the far-right Hindu fascistic regime in India. And Sunak wants to bring as many Indian students as possible, not because he has any interest in promoting Indian students coming, but he has a kind of position that has been allocated to him by the Indian regime. That is to say, he is a tool of the BJP and the RSS regime fronted by Narendra Modi in India. So I have said all of that before I read the actual copy in the Times. So there is a significant part to be played in students' numbers and students' kind of status being deployed by Rishi Sunak, whatever the actual numbers coming from whatever countries. But there is absolutely no credibility based on the evidence in whatever Sunak is saying about the economy, whatever Hunt is saying about the economy. Because today, 3 days after that piece in the Times on the 27th of January appeared, the IMF is saying that the British economy is going to be the worst performing economy of the so-called developed economies, including Russia. Now, in addition to that, there is this piece on page 2 of the Times of Friday, the 27th. 15 billion pounds is written off on PPE and COVID drugs that cannot be used. Now, the point is, where did the 15 billion go? I mean, who was paid that money? It was Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak was the Chancellor of the Exchequer or the Finance Minister in the UK when most of those deals under COVID emergency were made. There was hardly any Labour Party or any other party because there is no real other party. The Lib Dems don't really exist as a party. So there are only two political parties. One is the Conservatives, and the other is, of course, the Labour Party. And the Labour Party hardly has any comparable billionaires or business tycoons. Nobody can be compared with Michel the Brassiers. So most of the money went to the pockets of conservatives, who coincidentally, many of them, are also donors to the Conservative Party. Just like the BBC's chairman, whom Boris Johnson favored, and who procured Boris Johnson's guarantor, a so-called distant cousin called Blythe, based in Canada, for a loan guarantee up to £800,000. So the majority of the money, 15 billion, and that is only a part admission, it's not the full disclosure. The 15 billion pounds that have been spent has been now being burned. Now that cannot be true. The items may be being burned, but the money is not being burned because it has gone to the pockets of people and they have not returned the money. And it is clear that the United Kingdom, they keep saying it's a developed country, but it is not. When it comes to internal domestic relationship and policies, a very small number of people all of them conservative or conservative aligned, really occupy the real positions of power. And they are not supporters of universal education. They are not supporters of universal health. They are not supporters of universal basic income. They are not supporters of civilization, to put it in one word. If allowed to carry on with their kind of instincts, which are backward, uncivilized, selfish, and in breach of any known or knowable rules and laws and due process, etc., the conservatives would take the policy of non interference, that is, laissez faire, to the extreme, and they would go to the caves. They would take the country to the caves. And this is a narrative, this is a commentary that I'm making, which Starmer doesn't make. It's not an accident, because Starmer himself is not a non-conservative. He's a conservative, he's a Tory. Only difference is that he's wearing a kind of fake cap in order to occupy the post as the so-called leader of the Labour Party, which is murdering politically. When I say this about Starmer, I remind anyone who is watching this that I said the same thing about the Grenfell Tower, because Michael Gove on the Sunday Times front page headed, "We shared the blame for Grenfell deaths." That is a lie. As I have said exclusively, the logistics of approaching the Grenfell Tower from all four sides was uniquely advantageous and favorable to approaching it with heavy-duty military helicopters carrying emergency supply of water that could be sprayed onto the building and the fire could be put out. If they had 10 helicopters, in service for that emergency, then almost all the people would have survived, would have been saved. But this is 6 years and nobody, including Gove, nobody has said anything like what I have been saying for 6 years. Now, this is something that is worth exploring more, because why are the so-called opponents of the government, opponents of the Kensington Council, why are they silent about this? Why are they not seeing what I have been seeing from the very off, that water by helicopter should and could have been brought there to put the inferno out and save all these people, or most of them, absolutely. Because unlike other kind of buildings in London and big cities, this Grenfell Tower was completely, absolutely ideal for aerial approach, absolutely ideal for that kind of emergency. And I've been saying this. So, what I'm saying is not new. That is to say, I have always been vindicated on major predictions, major observations, major criticisms of state activities and state stupidities. I've been vindicated on Crossrail, and I'm about to be vindicated on HS2. The analysis that I have made about HS2 is getting there. Others are beginning to see it. Although it is more than what? More than 13 years since I started condemning it. That same reasons that I started condemning it for are being cited by others 13, 14 years later. For example, the Sun item, bylined by the Sun's political editor Harry Cole, is accompanied by a piece by a Labour Party member of the House of Peers. Whatever the actual byline, it was the Sun newspaper that for whatever reason has decided to begin to agitate publicly for the scrapping of HS2. And one of the things that I have said from the beginning, and I have been saying from the beginning, is this: what's the point of high speed in the context of the UK? There is no need for high speed in a country like Britain. Britain, in comparison with other countries, forget about the Western European countries, but you can take into account Russia, you can take into account India in terms of size, you can take into account China, and even Pakistan, which is much bigger than Britain. So, what they said, the supporters of the HS2 high speed, they say that it will save 20, 30 minutes to travel from Birmingham to London. My question has been, what the fuck for? What is this 20 minutes for? Where is the mysterious destination that nobody else can see? Where is the hidden destination which warrants, imposes, demands this saving of the 30 minutes? What for? The answer can only be that it is the Satan. The devil is dictating that agenda. Otherwise, the ordinary people don't need that 30 minutes save in the travel. I mean, it's ridiculous. If it was like 10 hours or 5 hours being saved, then it could be considered, not necessarily agreed, but 30 minutes. What is happening in London in that 30 minutes that they must go and catch? There is nothing going on in London when it comes to traveling from Birmingham. That 30 minutes or even 1 hour would make any difference. That is number one that they have acknowledged. The second thing is that because of the rising increase in the fares, railway fares, passengers numbers has been steadily going down using railways, and it will continue to go down. The third point is the state of the existing railway lines. As I said about the existing London Underground system, when I was arguing against Crossrail. The same applies to the various railway lines across England, especially near and attaching to and affecting the proposed, HS2 alignment. Because if it is time that they are talking about saving on journey time, then tens or 20 times multiplied, amount of time would be saved if the lines that are currently not as usable as they could be would be if they were repaired and attended to, and the money, a fraction of the money on HS2 spent on repairing the existing networks. And it goes on, the argument goes on, because repairing a network isn't second rate. It can be brand new or comparable, physically comparable to the brand new lines. So we will be talking more about that as well. So the Grenfell Tower is a disaster. The massacre was done by the Conservatives. And the Labour Party, politically being murdered, has been silent for the last 6 years. I have been the one who's been talking about it. Now, on the Sunday Times front page, Christina Lamb, their foreign correspondent, chief foreign correspondent, has an exclusive piece about Zimbabwe, where the Zimbabwean regime is massacring, genociding Zimbabwean people. These are black people, just like the 5 black-skinned Memphis, Tennessee policemen beat a black man, Tyler Nichols, to death. In Zimbabwe, other Zimbabweans are being murdered by the regime. And this regime is fronted by the same one who was a very close supporter of Mugabe, the first dictator and fascist, who had actually ordered the genocide of the people of the Matabele land. That name Matabele land I could not remember instantly in the previous edition that I discussed Christina Lamb's piece. And the genocide and the massacres were carried out under the command of the thug called Perence Shiri. That thug, the murderous thug, was a close ally of Mugabe. And Mugabe separated the general kind of commands of the army from this particular murderous squad, genociding squad, that Perence Shiri was centrally involved in, so that there would be no ordinary kind of rules of conduct that the ordinary military were required under international law, or even a modicum of international law, to observe. So the genocide of Zimbabweans, free, independent Zimbabwe, is taking place. It's not Ian Smith. It's not the white controllers of Rhodesia that are doing the genocide of the black people, African people. It's Africans claiming to be the revolutionary kind of stalwarts and leaders over decades of battle against the colonialist whites. Those black ones are murdering, massacring, committing genocide of other Africans. And unlike the time when Idi Amin and others blamed the Asians for taking over the economies in Kenya, in Uganda, these genocidist attacks are not being done by the Asian settlers. They have been ousted from the countries in East Africa and other parts. So it's the African people in Africa carrying out genocide, despite the fact that in Rwanda, when that genocide took place of African people carried out by other Africans, there was this series of displays, of expressions of shock and horror that African people are doing this. Now, that was in the 90s, the Rwanda genocide. And this is now 30 years on, let's say, nearly. And Mugabe's successor, known as the crocodile, is carrying out what Christina Lamb's piece calls soft genocide in Zimbabwe. And in the United Kingdom, the so-called left, the people who rush to claim that they were supporters of the anti-apartheid movement, etc., etc. These fuckers, most of them, almost all of them are white fuckers. They are silent about Zimbabwe genocide taking place. And they have been silent since 1980. They have been silent about the series of massacres that Mugabe carried out. Why are they condoning black-skinned criminals murdering other black-skinned people? I remember in 1980, one of the rallies that I actually observed in Waterloo, where the British favorite Pakistani revolutionary, I call traitor Ali, gave a spiel about Zimbabwe. I mean, he has been completely silent about Mugabe's massacres and things. And all the Asian kind of stooges, diversity displays that are promoted by the so-called liberals in the West and the United Kingdom are absolutely silent about the massacres and murders and rapes that take place as a matter of ordinary reality right across India. As I said, this piece in the Financial Weekend FT by Ramachandra Guha, who is a completely dishonest cunt, that this Lebanese-born, Muslim-raised woman who is editor of the Financial Times, for a mysterious reason, thinks is what they have given a platform. His piece was completely corrupt, empty, and devoid of any substance about what actually goes on in India, has been going on in India for 75 years. Why is that important? Because it matters to the lives of people, lives of the children, lives of the girls that are being targeted for being Muslims. 7, 8-year-old girls are being targeted by Hindu fanatics who gang rape systematically Muslim girls of 7, 8-year-olds. Of course, Rishi Sunak has never heard of that. So, generally, the news today contains, of course, Boris Johnson claiming that Vladimir Putin told him that he can murder him in 1 minute. There is really no evidence of a moral, ethical platform for justice, for redress against injustice and unfairness anywhere. There is, of course, a bureaucracy, serial bureaucracy that is called the United Nations, whose founding aims were absolutely brilliant. But ever since the foundation of the United Nations, it has been all going downhill. First, they murdered Dag Hammarskjöld, the only genuine United Nations Secretary General. And Hammarskjöld has not been replaced by another Secretary General who has come anywhere near matching his ideals and idealistic commitments. So it's a void. It's a moral, ethical void right across the world. And the void can be felt in the absence of any morality or ethics across the main institutions, in the main institutions, in parliament, in the judiciary, and in the media in the United Kingdom as well. We shall end this particular edition at just over 1 hour and 9 minutes. We're ending at 5:25 GMT on Tuesday, the 31st of January 2023, and we shall continue updates and updater commentaries. Now, this is broadcast under the banner of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions. Every principle that I have outlined, and I do outline and refer to and illustrate, depending on the particular topic and the sources that I use, is relevant to the evidence that Baby Angel Geronimo witnesses every day. For example, it is the depraved Boris Johnson, the liar, who is being branded as a depraved liar by the depraved bureaucracy in Moscow. The Baby Angel Geronimo was targeted for demonization by the depraved Boris Johnson and his bureaucracy at DEFRA. So everything that is going wrong morally and is immoral, unethical, unjust, unfair is part of the evidence being witnessed by Baby Angel Geronimo, who is the healthiest, most reliable witness anywhere on the planet Earth. So we shall be continuing updating and commenting. This is now 1 hour, 11 minutes, 11 seconds.